Okay, from now on, I am going to say, I used to like it when the colleges had, the numbers that Doug Flutie could wear number 22. You'd have, Brian Bosworth could play. I should come up with someone more contemporary, but he could wear number 44 and play linebacker. I'm trying to think of somebody who wears a number that isn't traditional. Certainly, the Georgia kicker always wearing a number in the 90s. Have you ever noticed the Georgia kicker nowadays always wears a number in the 90s? Maybe somebody else who wears you get a running back wearing 55 or something like that. Can do that in college. I'm now lobbying for that in college so that I don't mix up linebackers with defensive backs. And by the way, now I learned that Eli Zeiss has changed his number at Pitt to 25. So Paul is father. But telling us the insight, sounds like Josh Conklin, good hire for Wofford. And you've got somebody there, knows the ACC, so he probably ought to know a little bit about some of the recruits, the high-level recruits in the area there in South Carolina. And usually the prospects of getting recruits for a Southern Conference team, or let's say that FCS team, from the FBS level on a transfer level, is that you recruit them initially, and you know that you're probably not at Wofford going to take a guy away from Clemson. But what if the guy doesn't pan out at Clemson and he wants a chance to start somewhere? That's where you pick the guy up. And this is a philosophy that, Carl Torbush at ETSU just didn't have that much of. But, hey, Wofford picking up a coordinator from Pitt, ETSU picking up a coordinator from Florida State. That's not bad hires in the Southern Conference. And the big difference here, I would say, is that the stock of Conklin, 5-7 team, even after a improving season, I would suggest to you that because of the slow start, that Conklin's stock would be somewhat, stagnant. Sanders, he was getting fired. His stock was going down. But still, you're talking about coordinators from major programs. And although the stock of Pruitt and Moorhead went up, you're still talking about a similar hire to what Tennessee and Mississippi State made. For that matter, what Central Florida made with Josh Heupel. Anyway, Tri-City Sports. Now, you heard, by the way, that the Tennessee Volunteers, Bruce Pearl's back in town, or Knoxville. I guess he's not in our town here in the Tri-Cities. But Bruce Pearl is back in Knoxville. Tennessee now ranked number 23 in the AP poll with their 9-3 record. The only team in the top 25, by the way, without double-digit victories. 9-3, not a bad record. I mean, yes, But sure, Michigan State now number 1 since Villanova was defeated by Butler over the weekend. Villanova still got one first-place vote. Arizona State also was knocked off. You got the top 5, Michigan State, Duke, Villanova, Arizona State. Then the team ETSU almost beat, Xavier. They come in at number 5 at 14-1, followed by number 6, West Virginia. Oklahoma is having a nice run athletically despite the loss in football yesterday. They're number 7 in the country. Virginia, number 8. The former stop of Steve Forbes, Wichita State, is number 9. Traditional power, Kansas, number 10. Speaking of Steve Forbes, Texas A&M, 11. I'm not going to go down the entire list, but North Carolina is number 12. Also of interest to local fans, Kentucky, number 17. Gonzaga, number 19. They played for a national championship last year. Seton Hall's back. They're number 21, 13-2. And Clemson is number 25 in the country. Others receiving votes, I look at this. Auburn's got 4 others receiving votes. Alabama, Mississippi State, NC State also in there. UConn still is number 1 in the women's poll, followed by Notre Dame, Louisville, South Carolina, and Mississippi State. Undefeated Tennessee is number 7. Baylor, by the way, is sandwiched between Mississippi State and Tennessee at number 6. So, Holly getting it turned around this year. Where are the Fire Holly people? You don't like 13-0? Come on. Anyway, look at that. I'm looking at Virginia Tech got a receiving vote in the women's poll. NC State got a couple of votes. So how that goes. Anyway, that's the storyline there. I also want to mention here in our remaining time before the bottom of the hour break, the football playoff schedule. We broke a little bit of this the other day, but here we go. The playoffs, just to remind you, next week, Tennessee at Kansas City. Tennessee, the Titans play the first playoff game, 4:35. It's on cable. Actually, ESPN, and also, is ABC brought so much for it's on cable. ABC also has it. 4:35 at Kansas City, the Titans play. That is January 6th. There is a snowball's chance that Tennessee could host the AFC Championship game, but in order to do that, the Buffalo Bills would have to go on this incredible run, too. It'll be followed at 8:15, and this I do applaud. The LA Rams warm weather night game. They play Atlanta, plus a big market. That's a good idea. Buffalo at Jacksonville, Sunday at 1:05, then followed by Carolina at New Orleans at 4:40. Divisional playoff schedule, by the way, the times are out there. The Eagles will kick off the divisional round. They're the number one seed. You always play the lowest remaining seed. Okay, so if Atlanta wins, they'll play them. If not, then it's the winner of the New Orleans-Carolina game. That's a 4:35 kickoff in Philly on Saturday, January the 13th, followed by New England hosting either Kansas City, Tennessee, or Buffalo at 8:15. The Steelers on Sunday, January the 14th, host at 1 p.m. either the Jaguars, KC, and Tennessee. And finally, the Minnesota Vikings, they host the final playoff divisional game, 4:40 on Sunday the 14th. Tri-City Sports Now. More on football after this.
Vehicles in the Tri-Cities. It means service. With certified service technicians and a state-of-the-art facility, we can take care of any service need. It means value, with a large selection of stylish Buick models at great prices. It means precision, with the professional-grade engineering you'll find in every GMC vehicle. It means you can find your next vehicle at Crabtree Buick GMC in Bristol, Virginia, where your neighbors trade. Colin Cowherd. Carmelo only plays with stars when he is selected to a team. But nobody really wants to play with Melo. LeBron chose Cleveland over playing with you, Carmelo. D-Wade chose Cleveland over playing with you, Carmelo. And Melo was in New York City and could never convince one star to play with him. Not one. This is The Herd with Colin Cowherd.
2 through 5 on 1420 NBC Sports Radio Tri-Cities. Follow us on Facebook.
The sky is looking nice and clear today. However, it's chilly out with a high temperature of 29 and a low of 13. Partly cloudy skies are in the forecast tomorrow, along with a high of 34 and a low of 13. It looks like we'll have light cloud coverage on Thursday as well. Layer up for a high of 23 and a chilly low of 7. Clear skies are back in the forecast for Friday with a high of 24 and a low of 7. Look forward to sunny skies on Saturday as well, but bundle up for a cold start to the weekend with a high of 27 and a low of 15. This is Nathan Salt for the News 103.9 Livewire Weather Center. Count on it.
In Irwin, it's 22 and clear. In Greenville, it's 21 and clear. In Johnson City, it's 22 and clear.
The best seafood, steaks, and chicken are at the Harbor House in Johnson City. Broiled or fried fish, salad platters, salad bar, and homemade desserts. The Harbor House is famous for their popcorn shrimp, and on the weekends come and enjoy 30 butterfly shrimp for only $18.99. Harbor House uses the freshest high-quality ingredients. For the best seafood, go to the Harbor House, located on 2510 North Front Street in Johnson City, and the hours are Sunday through Thursday, 11 to 8, Friday and Saturday, 11 to 9.
There's a downfield throw. Notre Dame gets another one. On the run. Notre Dame might take it in. Miles Boykin is in the end zone. The Irish have come back. Their finest hour. Miles Boykin on the throw. A 55-yard touchdown pass play with 1:28 to play.
Well, there's an old pro, when he calls the Notre Dame games. That's his alma mater. It's Don Criqui. And that was the winning touchdown pass of Notre Dame's victory against LSU. in the Citrus Bowl. There's no L in citrus, otherwise you couldn't spell it. Let's see here. I'm trying to, let's see here. Pelican, no, there's no P. Bayou, no, there's no B. There's a T. Okay, there's a T for Tigers. There you go. So, Tigers State University, you couldn't spell without citrus. Like some T as, all right, you get, we're from Johnson City, by our area. You know, I mean, we gotta remember the great quote. Even if a lot of fans around here probably would not like to remember the quote. Marky Bilson, Tri-City Sports Now. I really think that's the beginning of the end for LSU. I don't think they're going to go 0-12 next year. But this little battle with Matt Canada, who they only were paying $1.2 million to be the offensive coordinator. And now Ed Orgeron, he can't get along with this guy who only made Nate Peterman into a pro quarterback. Hey, Ed Orgeron says that his team needed to get better in the red zone. Listen to this.
We bogged down the red zone. It's something that we got to get better at the red zone offense. It looks like I'm out to watch the film to find out what's going on, but we just bogged down there, and something we need to get better at.
Well, that is, what are we going to say? That is certainly a criticism of the offensive coordinator right there. Also, there's a lot of talk that Darius Geis didn't get any carries for a large part of the game. This is what that running back for the Tigers had to say about that.
It's just how the game played out. I have another great running back behind me. We need to get him some touches, get him some carries as well. It's just about being a team player. I'm not crying and moaning for carries and for playing time. I want Darryl, Nick, and Clyde to get in. So it's just all part of the game plan.
That really does sound like, doesn't it, just the arguing within LSU and all this, Having a 59-year-old tight ends coach is what LSU wants to do for their offensive coordinator. I think it's the beginning of the end for Ed Orgeron. I really do. And LSU, I think, one of the more prestigious programs in the SEC in the country, really. Oh, listen to Colin Coward. He'll talk about them being more prestigious than Notre Dame. That's prestigious. They weren't yesterday. Tri-City Sports. Now, of course, a lot of also talk about Central Florida. Hey, they were 13-0. Shouldn't they be in the national championship hunt? No, they really shouldn't. Scott Frost did an incredible turnaround. Let's not forget they were 0-12 just 2 years ago. Of course, before that, they were 11-1. So, what was the Big 12 thinking by not inviting them in? I don't know. But nevertheless, Central Florida. The problem with trying to say that Central Florida is worthy of playing for the national title, they're in the American. And I've heard this argument that Central Florida deserves to be playing for a national championship because they beat Auburn, and Auburn beat both Georgia and Alabama. Of course, Auburn also lost to Georgia. And let's also face this fact. Auburn was playing in their bowl game like a high school senior that got stood up for the prom and had to take his sister or go stag or something like that. I mean, Auburn did not want to be in the Who Cares Bowl against Central Florida. Central Florida had something to prove. Auburn, what were they there for? To get a check. And that was it. And so you want to tell me that, they beat, they proved they could hang in the SEC, Central Florida. Not really. Not in my book. And remember what I said earlier on Tri-City Sports Now. When you're looking for college, when you're looking for, who's going to win a bowl game, look for the team that has something to prove, something to play for. I gave a good example, the Houston Bowl, which actually drew one of the largest bowl crowds because Texas was playing there. So all the Texas fans in Houston showed up to the game. And Missouri really didn't have a chance. I mean, we played the bit of the defensive lineman from Missouri whining, and our coaches left us, and all the. If you can't call, I mentioned this before. I'm going to repeat my argument. It is very difficult to make an argument of players back when are better than they are today. They're bigger, they're stronger today, et cetera, et cetera. An argument, though, could be made based on what the Missouri defensive lineman was whining about, saying that, our coaches left us. You know something? It's your 13th game of the year. You don't have a grasp of the offense yet. I thought Drew Lock was going to play in the pros. I still think he will. But quarterbacks of another era called their own plays. I would imagine that Locke knows how to audible. And so why can't, why would this be anything? I mean, really? I was totally disappointed with that. The defensive lineman's name was Marcel Frazier. Here, listen to yourself. We played this earlier, but I really cannot believe this.
Hypo left us in a bad position. It is what it is. And Ellerby left us in a bad position. So, as men, they have to look in the mirror. They let a whole bunch of teenage boys down, 18, 19-year-olds down. They left, and they have to do what's best for their family, but I think it showed up a little bit today. We were doing things that we haven't done since maybe the Auburn game. And it showed up. You practiced almost for a whole month without a whole coordinator or offensive line coach after having one of the most dominant offenses in the nation. It's tough. I mean, I believe that they let some guys down, but they had to do what's best for them. And I don't quite understand it because I know Scott Frost is staying at UCF for their bowl game. So I don't quite understand all the politics of it. But it showed up, Texas, I don't believe they had anybody leave their entire staff. And we had two offensive coaches leave on the most explosive offense arguably in the country. So it showed up.
So Barry Odom doesn't know how to coach. He can't call plays. What's the deal? I would think that he somehow got to be the head coach. Terry Bradshaw's laughing hysterically at Marcel Frazier, who, by the way, is a defensive player making comments about offense. You tell me how that works. He won 4 Super Bowls calling his own plays, and people called him dumb. Give me a break. I mean, our offensive coaches left us and all. Really? How about that Missouri, really, Houston Bowl against Texas. It's a road game for them. They don't really, what's the motivation for Missouri? They're not going to be nationally ranked. Their motivation is don't get hurt. That's what their motivation is. Texas had a winning record on the line. They had a big crowd. They had a chance. They wanted to prove themselves. First-year coach, disappointing season, but a chance to make all right in a bowl game. They had something to prove. Missouri didn't. You see what happened? Look for that in bowl matchups. Now, obviously, that's not... Got one last college football game coming up with Alabama and Georgia. So they're not, they both have something to play for. Alabama, by the way, a slight favorite. What are they, 4 points? Okay, that's interesting to me. I mean, that you would think that Alabama is a 4-point favorite. The second place team in the SEC West, better than the SEC champion. But I realize that. Anyway, just something you said. By the way, would UCF be undefeated this year if they had to play Georgia Tech? Remember, they had 2 games that were canceled by weather. Would Georgia Tech be in a bowl game this year if they had to play that game? And the fact that you are not automatically saying, I think that UCF would have beaten Georgia Tech, the fact that you're not saying that right off the bat shows me all you need to know why UCF was not in the Final Four, nor should they have been. I admit that, it's for the big conferences. I don't have a problem, by the way. You know what I would do? What I would really like to see happen, because I think it's inevitable, and I just think the NCAA is, you can't even levy a legitimate penalty against Penn State. I don't like the NCAA anymore. I think they've outlived their use. The 5 conferences break off. You can have the NCAA for the middle tier. If you want to play a little bit, if you want to do sort of like an English soccer type of thing, where you have a Division I and the Division I teams play for the championship. There's no, you got to finish first. There's no, Super Bowl in English Premier League soccer. It's the best record. I kind of like that. And then people wonder, why is soccer taking off and all that? The regular season means something. How about that? But if you finish in one of the last 2 spots, you move down to Division II, and the top 2 teams in Division II the next season, they move up to Division I, and they're playing for a championship. Now, admittedly, that's tough when your team drops to D2. You're playing for next year. But in college football, you can kind of see, something like that. Now, how do you determine you, Kansas, and you, Illinois? I've just named 2 teams that were really bad this year. I assume Kansas was. They've been down for so long, So there are actually some teams that wouldn't, Tennessee would not necessarily, if there's only 2 teams, drop down to D2 in this case and all that. And by this, I mean D2 by English soccer rankings, not necessarily, NCAA rankings. But the point that I'm trying to make is that I would really like to see the major conferences break off. If they want to pay the players, great. If they want to play the but it really is a charade trying to tell me that Chicago State and Kentucky are on an even level of Division I athletics. It really is a charade to try to tell me that Central Florida, and for that matter, Alabama, Clemson, Oklahoma, and Georgia, are really on the same level. Really, just the fact that I say, well, don't forget there was that game canceled with Georgia Tech. Would UCF have beaten them? It's a 5-6 Georgia Tech team. And you're not going and say, well, of course they would. Like you would say to Georgia. There's no question Georgia was going to beat, even though Georgia Tech won the game last year. That wasn't, it's a bad ACC team. You're saying, my goodness, even Tennessee beat Georgia Tech this year. And you're not going, well, it was early on in the year. That option's kind of tough. I guess there might have been a chance. That's what your reaction is. That's all you need to know. Gave up 55 points to Riley Ferguson in Memphis. They did beat Memphis twice, though, didn't they? So, I don't know. You're really thinking that Memphis, which admittedly was ranked nationally, but those are their signature victories. We beat Memphis 62-55. I don't know. Any other news here? Some things, of note. Tommy Thigpen looks like he's an assistant coach at Tennessee. He's going to leave to coach linebackers at North Carolina. John Chavis, defensive coordinator of the 98 Balls. He'll be the new defensive coordinator, reports are, at Arkansas. Now here we go. Because Tennessee hires Jeremy Pruitt and not Chad Morris. What do you think about that? Because you got to believe that if Chad Morris was the Vols coach right now, Jeremy Pruitt would be coming back. Or excuse me, not Jeremy Pruitt, listen to me. John Chavis would be coming back. I'll get it right. Defensive back, linebacker, Chavis, Pruitt. I'll get it all right here in a minute. But yeah, that's kind of an interesting story right there. This is not, like I said, instead of Phil Fulmer is here. Selena Summers, come on here. Right after saying that right after she said and bragged on, until Lane Kiffin got here, until the last 10 years, it's always been a Tennessee man who's been the head coach. So it's good that John Chavis is coming in. And I mentioned, Tennessee program is insular. Oh, it isn't. You just said it was. The fight song speaks of murdering feds, of murdering outsiders. It's an insular program, folks. You just hired Phil Fulmer as your AD. You didn't hire Jeff Long. But no, the question mark then remains. And again, Pruitt, like I said, I think that if John Curry had targeted Jeremy Pruitt initially, hey, we want an assistant from Alabama. That's the cock of the walk in the SEC. That's what we want to be. If we can't get Saban, we want his top lieutenant. Nobody would have, he'd still be the AD. So I don't think it's necessarily a poor hire. But again, I start to ask, well, would you rather have Mike Leach? Would you rather had Chav Morris, which was less than inspiring, but John Chavis? We'd all rather have Pruitt than Greg Schiano. We've got that. We understand that. And anyway, the one interesting also thing that I see is this the John Gruden situation in Oakland, or at least Oakland for now. I could actually see Oakland moving as soon as possible. You know, you just think that new coach, and I know that doesn't necessarily affect the finances or the leases of the team, but just, new broom sweeps clean. Do we really want to be in Oakland? When we're eventually moving to Las Vegas, this is a bad look. This is a really bad look. I don't think the Raiders should be moving in the first place. I don't think teams should move. It's one thing to move from, I don't know, if ETSU wanted to move their stadium from on campus to Bluntville, let's say, admittedly they'd have to pick it up brick by brick, but I talk about a new arena for ETSU, okay? Let's say they build it in Bluntville. Try to take advantage of all the Tri-Cities. It would be controversial, don't get me wrong, but you can kind of see that, and it's the same fan base. And I realize this is college versus pro, but, it's one thing to do that. It would be one thing for the Johnson City Cardinals to move and just say, you know what, Cardinal Park, decrepit, let's move to Thomas Stadium. I don't think that's going to happen. Thomas Stadium really doesn't have the seating capacity. But, it'd be one thing to do that. It's another thing for the Johnson City Cardinals to move to Paintsville, Kentucky. So, just saying that, or for that matter, Sevierville. That's one of the things. I'm just speaking aloud now. I'm running my mind. I hadn't thought of that. There's all this talk that there's going to be a new AA franchise in Knoxville, that the Tennessee Smokies are going to move back to Knoxville. Let's start the rumor mill up. What do you say? Elizabethton twins move to Sevierville. It's not going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. But with Boyd Sports buying the team, yeah, the ballpark will still be there. They can put whatever improvements they want to Cardinal Park. It's not going to be as nice, to Joe O'Brien Field. It's not going to be as nice as Smokies Park in Sevierville. The talk is, moving the AA team to Knoxville. I hope it happens. You know what else I hope happens? And I've said this, and people call me a dreamer, but I'm not the only one, just like John Lennon. I hope if that happens and the Cubs move their AA team to Knoxville, and let's just say Elizabethton moves to Sevierville. I'm just throwing, possibilities out. Let's not spend all this money at the Pinnacle for a vacuum cleaner salesman to believe that he's a general manager. Let's not have, the Kingsport Mets afterthought. Johnson City Cardinals are run very well. This would be a shame. Let's have Boyd Sports then put a AA team in to the Tri-Cities. They can put it in Johnson City if they wish. Have the Cincinnati Reds draft the area. Because let's face it, it behooves them to have a team in AA in the Tri-Cities where they could call somebody up in the morning and he could drive up to Cincinnati and be there well in time for batting practice. He could even check into his hotel and get a little nap before then. Than it is Florida, where their AA team is now. And it would reinforce the Reds brand in the Tri-Cities. So anyway, there you go. That was my thing. Anyway, I got off onto a tangent because what I want to go to, John Gruden to the Raiders. That's what the rumor mill is. Got rid of Jack Del Rio. But he's not going to go until he calls the playoff game between the Titans and the Chiefs on Saturday. He's got that commitment. Gets paid a lot of money by ESPN. Wouldn't surprise me. Hey, I mean, Bill Parcells was rumored to be the Cowboys coach, and he was still working for ESPN on their NFL coverage. There is the matter of the Raiders satisfying the Rooney Rule. Did the Cowboys satisfy the Rooney Rule when Parcells was hired? I know that the Lions were actually fine because they hired Steve Mariucci right away, and they didn't go through the quasi-hiring process. Anyway, I'm sure that I will be interested to see if ESPN asks him about it, because I remember Chris Mortensen sitting down with Bill Parcells, who was then, very deflective, if you will. But when Parcells was first contacted by Jerry Jones, the coach of the Cowboys, those many years ago, I remember, Mortensen sitting down with Parcells and interviewing him about it. Will Gruden have the same scrutiny? He should, because he's been linked to every job out there. People are even talking about, well, he could have been at Indianapolis last year, That could have happened. He should really address these rumors. All right, Tri-City Sports Now. By the way, a lot of the coaching, and I'll just say this real quick, final coaching rumor. Bruce Arians stepped down, retired, health reasons. Arizona Cardinals, they had a very interesting staff. They've got a guy on their staff, actually, or at least he was last year, who dates back. He coached under Andy Gustafson at Miami in the 50s. Miami Hurricanes here. It was before the Dolphins, okay? So, wealth of knowledge there. I was very impressed with that. But, one of the guys that talked about the Cardinals are reaching out to the coordinators of the Patriots, but you know who else is in the mix? Former Titans coach Mike Munchak. He's now an offensive line coach with the Steelers, but supposedly they're going to be looking at Munchak as well. So, Mr. Houston Oiler, and then later Mr. Tennessee Titan, who now is, back in Pennsylvania because he played at Penn State. Maybe he becomes the head coach of the Cardinals. And don't discount that, because the Cardinals, Arians used to be the offensive coordinator of the Steelers. He had a lot of old Steelers and Pittsburgh coaches on his staff. Heck, Andy Gustafson played at Pitt, remember? Okay, so you're looking at that. I wouldn't be at all surprised if they continue to go that route, that Munchak would come in. Interesting. Well, you wouldn't want to wish that on anybody. You're working for the Bidwells, and then also, I guess it's not what you don't have. I'm trying to remember. You don't have. I can't even remember the guy's name. Bud something, who moved the Oilers. You know what I'm talking about. The Oilers to the Titans. Listen to me. I'm so knowledgeable. I cannot remember Bud. All I can think is Bud Adams. Thank you. At least you won't have him to work for, but then you'd have the Bidwells. You either work for the Adams or the Bidwells. That is 2 stints in purgatory. And, I always felt for Joe Bugle, who I always thought could have been a real good head coach, but instead he had to work for the Bidwells and Al Davis. He had no chance. Imagine you got to work for the Bidwells and the Adams. Well, maybe, maybe then, I don't know, you don't want the Cardinals' job. Larry Fitzgerald coming back? Jason Witten says he is. Some final thoughts on Tri-City Sports Now coming up.
Holiday parties, celebrations. Let Happy Hour Tri-City Liquor be your